Hello and welcome. I'm Kendra Kunov, and I first heard this quote from Joseph Campbell a number of years ago, but it's something that has really stuck with me, and it certainly pops up at certain times. And now is definitely one of them. So I want to preface this conversation right now by really clearly saying I don't claim to have the answers. I'm hoping in this moment that the trash truck outside my window is not so loud that it's distracting. But I certainly don't claim to have the answers about this quote, participate joyfully in the suffering of the world, or to know with any certainty exactly what that means. But I think it's important. I think it's important in general, and I think it's important right now. We just had a massive shooting with many people dead and many more injured. There's the immediate effect of that, and I can't even claim to predict what the long-term effect of that is. What's the effect on the children of people who died? What is the effect on the families of people who are injured and may be going into massive debt because of systemic insurance issues in this country, and the debate or conversation, if you will, around healthcare. The same goes for hurricanes that were just in Texas, and we're just in like North Carolina, Florida, or South Carolina. Anyway, these areas where there's immediate effect and then there's long-term effect, and we often don't even really know what that is. How these traumas impact both the direct people involved, how they impact families of those people, I realized yesterday, I had this thought. I thought, wow, I'm in some way I'm connected to so many people in so many places of the world. I bet I know somebody who is directly connected to somebody who was hurt in Las Vegas. And sure enough, it wasn't but 2 minutes later that I saw two different posts, one from somebody who I actually am acquaintances with, and somebody that I have never met, but have this connection on Facebook, sharing that they personally knew somebody there, that person was either a family member or that person was a friend. And these are really tumultuous times, and I don't have the sense that is going to change anytime soon. And that's something that's actually required of us right now, is learning how to live in these times. And I don't mean learning how to numb ourselves out so that we don't feel what's happening. And I don't mean getting so stressed out that we become incapable of functioning in our lives. And so for me, this question of what does it really mean to joyfully or participate joyfully? He says, participate joyfully in the suffering of the world. So I hope that this is just the beginning of a conversation, and that those of you who are watching live will chime in with your questions, with your comments, with your suggestions, with your shares about experience, life experience. I hope that any of you who watch the replay will chime in, and I will certainly come back, and other people will probably also then come back and be able to witness and hear and respond to your comments on the replay. So please let this be a conversation. And there's a few things that I do want to actually speak to, and And then I also, I think part of this I'll really be talking more like I normally do. And then one of the pieces is, so I bought these marigolds, and I'm going to be stringing them. I have a needle and I have a thread, and I'm going to be stringing them to hang in our house. And this is really more at the end, but I'll just thread it in here, because it is a piece that I think is important to this conversation, which has to do with creating beauty. And it doesn't necessarily take a lot of time to create beauty. It certainly doesn't have to take hardly any money. My mother, I think, really imbued my life with that truth. From a very early age, we had very, very little money, and actually lived on food stamps. We lived in a trailer, and we lived on food stamps for the better part of my very early years. Well, once we left the monastery, and then anyway. And but she created a life that was really beautiful. She found things that didn't cost a lot of money or take a lot of space, but that brought beauty into our lives. And I think she also taught me, to see beauty. And this really is, I'm going completely backwards. This was what I intended to talk about at the end. But I'll bring it now, just because it's so clearly arising. One of the practices that I believe is really important for us as human beings in this time that we live in a time that really does have quite a lot of tumult in it, is very tumultuous, in a time that's moving very fast, in a time when there really does seem to be, on a more than daily basis, something that could break our hearts. You know, there are things that I think in another time would have astounded us, would have, sort of knocked us over, and we've become a little bit numb because there's so much. So I had an experience about 2 months ago now, or creeping up on 2 months ago, that really encapsulates this practice for me. It's something that I have done. Again, I really think my mother gave this to me she didn't explicitly name it, but I think she did it, and she brought it into our life, and it's become something that I have practiced very consciously in my life. So I had a moment about 2 months ago, or it was more than a moment, but where I was really kind of overwhelmed with some things that were happening in my life. I was feeling there were things that were just going on in my life. There were some challenges that I was having in some relationships, and then I also found out that somebody who was very instrumental in my life died quite suddenly. And so I was having this kind of emotional and frustrating day. I was with my children, and then in the midst of that, I learned that somebody very close to me, or actually it wasn't very close to me, but he was very instrumental in my life, died very suddenly. And I got hit with this sort of wave of emotion, and I felt a little discombobulated, because he was somebody who was quite pivotal at a juncture in my life. And I started getting really irritated with my children, and they were sort of misbehaving. So it was like, I in no way am trying to compare this experience to, frankly, like an actual tragedy like what just happened in Las Vegas. This is more for all of us, in our day-to-day lives. But I was feeling overwhelmed by my children were misbehaving. I was getting cranky with them. And we were in our garden space which was in our friend's house, and then they destroyed something in her garden and it was just like, it just felt like everything was wrong. And so I sort of put myself on a timeout, if you will. I sat myself down on a bench. I said, you kids need to be over here. Please stop destroying things. I put myself on the bench, and it wasn't for me about trying to get away from any of my feelings. It was like, wow, I'm kind of struck by this immense grief at the loss of this person. I'm feeling overwhelmed by these different pieces. I'm angry about this relational piece. There's all of this swirling. And I know that any of you who are watching this know this experience of the swirling of all of it. And rather than push that down, I shouldn't feel that way, I should get on with my day, I should, it wasn't about that. It was like, can I feel that? And can I simultaneously broaden my gaze? So it's not so much about shifting it, like, okay, I'm focused on the bad and I'm supposed to focus on the good, so can I shift it? It was like, can I broaden it? Here I am sitting in this garden, feeling all that I feel, and can I broaden it and also see what's beautiful? In addition, it's really important, this is a broadening practice, not like a shifting of your myopic gaze from one place to the other. And I started to do that, and I started to cry a little bit, just I was noticing this bird over here and this flower over here. And I was hearing my children actually play together nicely. And I was still I still felt angry, I still felt grief. I was feeling that. And then my children came on either side of me, and my initial impulse was to want to push them away. I was already feeling too much and I wanted some space. And, but I kind of softened. I was like, oh, they're wanting closeness too, and can I just soften a little bit? Can I still feel what I'm feeling? Can I widen and see what is also beautiful? Can I soften to these little beings who are wanting to be near me in love? And my daughter, literally, she started kissing from the top of my head, and she was kissing all down my body. She kissed all the way down my body to my toes, like all the way down my legs. And it was like too much. It was overwhelming. I already felt overwhelmed. I felt overwhelmed, and I was like, oh, can I kind of handle this? And again, I had to soften again. And then my son starts on this side. He starts mirroring her, mimicking what she's doing. And I have one child on either side kissing down, and I just start weeping. I start sobbing uncontrollably. And my children start to think like that it's funny. They're sort of, I'm sobbing, they're kissing me, they're looking at each other, they're giggling. And so that's the specific of my life. But the practice itself is really this practice. Again, I think of my mother. I think of my mother, who was a single mom, who had very little money, who had very little support, who was trying to get her teaching degree, who was working a number of jobs, who was, trying to raise her child right, who sort of, I'm sure she felt all the things that I feel in my life. And we all have some version of that. We all have our careers or our jobs, or we've lost our jobs, or our children need dental work, or we're tired, or we have to pack all the lunches every day and remember all the soccer gear, and we all have all the things. And then somebody dies, or somebody gets ill, or and then there's national tragedies and there's international tragedy. We all have all of this. And one practice that I believe is invaluable in this time is to remember beauty. And sometimes it's to do something like, string these marigolds and hang them in the house for your children, or, make a crayon drawing and tack it on the wall, or clear an area and make a very simple altar with leaves that are changing color. Sometimes it's pausing as you walk hurriedly through your day, going here and there and picking everybody up and what have you, but stopping for just a moment and feeling, oh, I can also feel the breeze on my cheeks or the sun. I can also see a bird. I can look at the clouds for a moment, that there's something about allowing that beauty also exists that is vital for us in these times. So an important connective piece to that is most of us don't really take the time to feel what we're feeling fully. So we get impacted by something like Las Vegas, and maybe we're struck for a moment or a day. And frankly, we can, oftentimes we imagine that we're staying engaged. Like that's the participate, right? In Joseph Campbell's quote, participate joyfully. The participate is stay engaged. And we can trick ourselves into thinking that we're staying engaged, that we're participating by doing something like watching the news all day, because it tricks us into thinking, I'm feeling it, I'm staying engaged. But often that's actually a numbing. And that there's something to taking a pause in our days, being willing to really breathe, to feel what our bodies feel when a tragedy of this magnitude actually occurs, or to feel what it feels like when someone in our connected circle gets cancer, or to feel what it feels like, to actually stop for 1 minute or 5 minutes or 30 minutes, give yourself what you can, but on a semi-regular basis, and actually feel it. So most of us, we don't take the time to feel it, and either kind of stay bombarded, which is a way of not really feeling the depth of it, or, and this is kind of a ping pong that happens. We stay bombarded. We read the news, we stay like, I have to stay engaged. We stay bombarded. And then it's like, oh, I need to self-care, right? I need a pedicure. I need a massage. I need to, I need, these ways of checking out also. And I'm not saying any of those things are bad. Yes, reading the news is valuable to stay engaged. Go get a pedicure for real if that truly fills you up. But often, a lot of these things are a way, or I'm going to treat myself to ice cream. And all of these things are fine, but they're often also a way of actually ping-ponging between not feeling because we stay overwhelmed, and then not feeling, but using self-care as an excuse. And staying engaged is important. Self-care is important. And so is truly taking the time to feel, which is not watching the news. It's actually pausing and feeling what's really, and this is the tricky part. You might also find joy, right? You might find grief, but you might find that you're also happy about this, or you see this. And I think so many of us are conflicted about, is it okay that I feel something good when I know that so many are in a state where maybe we don't even know, right? I don't know what any of those people is feeling. They may feel conflicted too, but where I imagine somebody else is suffering, and then it's like, is it okay that I might feel something different sometimes? And to me, that's this other part of the participate joyfully. He didn't say participate happily. He said participate joyfully. And to me, joy is a much deeper feeling. And it's one that it runs so much deeper inside our being. And it connects to that part of us that's willing also to notice the beauty. That there's true and deep joy. That there's beauty in the world. I wrote about this the other day. My daughter was born the night before the Sandy Hook shootings happened. And she was born very late at night. And of course I had just given birth and I was sleep deprived. And then at some point I was laying in bed with her that day. And I was looking at Facebook on my phone. And I was seeing what had happened. And I was feeling like the immense joy of my new daughter, who I was literally holding, and she was nursing me, like in our bodies, this feeling, and also feeling the tragedy and just this, like the depth of grief of all these parents who were never going to get to hold their child like that again. But in this time, we actually have to do things that allow us to get wider so that we can hold both, because it's not one or the other. It's not just grief or just joy. It's not just anger or just peace. It just isn't one or the other. We live in a world that's, does indeed contain dualities and polarities, and we're entering an era that requires us to actually expand. It requires us to include them, like not deny the truth of them, but actually to grow wider so that we hold the duality, that we hold the polarity, that we hold all of it in our awareness, in our energetic body mind, if you will, that we have this capacity. I believe all humans have this capacity, but my guess is if you're here watching this, that you probably even more so have this capacity, or you're closer to realizing it. So I want to just check. I know there were a couple of points, and I think already I'm going to wrap this up relatively soon, just for the sake of time. So I really sat with, I think I've already spoken to this, but I really sat with like the pieces of this quote, and it struck me that it was a very intentionally created quote. I don't know if that's true, but participate actually comes first. That it's like a vow. It's like a vow that I will stay engaged. It's a vow that acknowledges that I am connected to you, that I cannot and will not turn my back. But right after that comes the word joyfully, which is, again, it's like a dedication. It's like devotion to life itself, and that I serve no one by falling into the trap of simply the suffering aspect, or even just the participate, right? There's like the doing of that, and the joyful is the being of that. Yes, I can be here fully, and I can do so joyfully. Because I am born now, it's like I can take on the responsibility of the vow to participate in the world such as it is, because it's the one that I got born into. And then in the suffering of the world, it acknowledges, I don't even quite know when Joseph Campbell was alive, but if we look at the teachings of all the great, masters throughout all time, there is a thread that says that suffering exists. Certainly the Buddha said it very, very clearly. But he also said not that suffering would ever end, but that there was a way out of it. And I think that this quote actually is part of that. How do I participate but joyfully? How do I actually expand and widen to not negate what's so, but to expand and widen around it, to include all of it, to include that this tragedy happened in Las Vegas at the same time that a new baby was being born, at the same time that somebody was getting married, at the same time that a hawk was soaring, that on myriad spaces throughout the entire world, nothing happened. And then many places throughout the world, intense suffering happened. And then many places throughout the world, intense joy happened. And they all happened at the same moment. So I'll just reiterate two practices. And there are many, these ones that actually strengthen our nervous system and allow us to widen, to grow wide, to hold. But one is the one that I spoke to, which is actually slowing down, pausing, and taking the time to feel. Not taking in new data, but actually allowing yourself to feel what you feel from what you already know and have experienced and are being, the input that's already come in is like, I feel, I find like there are yoga asanas that are very good for this too, right? You can put a brick or a bolster behind and it sort of physically forces this opening of the chest and the heart, and then allow yourself to actually sink into that, to take the time. It's like it forces that opening in your body and your heart so that you feel. And that requires a slowing down. It requires a stopping. There's lots of breath practices that also support this, and I can talk about that more another time. And then the second one, which I was speaking to in that story about my children, which is, and this, both of them, so I would say maybe the fundamental practice is slowing down, pausing. It's not stopping, but there's a pause. They both actually require a pause. And I believe they both probably require breath. So, but is that willingness to widen your gaze? Again, it's really not the shifting from like, this is pain and I'm going to shift to beauty, or this is suffering and I'm going to shift to joy, or this is anger and I'm going to shift to gratitude. I believe that just holds in place like a certain kind of myopic view, but it's truly a practice of widening and seeing in the periphery and allowing for whatever you feel, whether it's grief or rage or hopelessness or pain or all of these things, and then widening to what is also beautiful. And you could really take both of them on as daily practices. You could take them on as weekly practices. But I promise that there's something truly valuable about the consistency of practices like that to allow you to, we don't like lift weights one time and then say like, now I'm strong, I'm done, that's it. It's like you actually have to build these muscles and grow the strength of your feeling body, the strength of your energetic nervous system. And I really don't mean this as a downer, but because I truly believe these times are not going to get easier. They're going to get fuller. They're going to get more beautiful. But they're also, there's just a way I feel like they're going to continue to challenge us in this way. They're not going to get simpler. Or more easy to metabolize. So thank you to any of you who joined me here live, and thank you to any of you who are watching the replay. And as I shared, I would love for this to be a continued dialogue. I didn't quite have it in me to do the talking part and the stringing of the marigolds part. But that's these simple tasks that we do with our hands, this creating beauty, these small art altars that can bring our attention and can actually, there's the noticing of the beauty and then there's the generating of it. And they really don't have to take much, but it's an act of devotion towards beauty in the world. It doesn't deny that there's pain, but it also allows this act of devotion simply towards that there is beauty in the world. So, yeah, thank you. And I hope that this continues to be an ongoing conversation, because I believe that it's one that we sorely need, and we need all of our voices to really speak to what it is that we're needing and what we can do in these times. Thank you. Ciao.